right, well, I believe we're at 7:31 or 2, so let's call the meeting to order. Any comments on the minutes from last meeting? Changes? If not, if I could get a motion to approve?
So moved.
And thank you. All those in favor, signal by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. All right, review of the financials. Who's taking those today? All right.
Corey's here today.
Hi, Corey.
How's it going? All right. Attached is the RDA Budget and Actions Report as of September 30th, 2025. These reports present year-to-date budgeted and actual expenditures in the operating budget and actual expenditures in the capital budget. Revenues, expenditures, and other funding sources are reported once they are realized. As of September 30th, 2025, expenses are $151.32 for bond contractual services, $166.35 for water service, and $7,285 for bond costs, which totals $7,602.67. Yearly bond payments have been made as of April, so no change as of last report. Is there any questions?
Any questions for Corey? All right, if I could get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, signal by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. All right. Any public comments for items that are not listed as public hearing or discussion? Hearing any? Any business items with public hearing or public discussion? Other business? Aaron?
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being flexible on your schedule. We here, myself, and actually Commissioner French were at the WEDC's Wisconsin Economic Summit last week, which was a great event, so appreciate making the shift because we did want to make sure we could get in front of the board this month to start looking at our drafts. So what we have this evening, you should receive them in your packets, were the draft documentation, the plan proposals and boundaries for the two new districts that we've been discussing for the past several weeks, the past few meetings. And so hopefully you've had a chance to go through those. We're just kind of hit the highlights. I would like to recognize Kendall as putting together, she went through the old past grants or old past plans and put together the format, mishmash of 2 or 3 previous presentations, did all of the graphics and the boundaries. So Kendall had a great hand in everything that you're seeing before you today. So we're going to start with the first one. If you want to go ahead and pull that one up and slide it up to the screen, hopefully that. Let's start with the map, and let's do the census tract map first. We'll just use that one as the primary. So this is the map as we've been looking at. We're calling it currently the placeholder district until we find a better name for it. We have a couple potentials, but this is the placeholder district. So as you can see, it is that same core area we've been talking about. It is the area in green. The 2 pink areas are references. We overlaid, or Kendall overlaid the qualified census tracts on that existing district. So you can see that off-green area in those cores. Those are our current qualified census tracts, or at least portion of them. So a majority of this district is a qualified census tract, which means it is, according to HUD guidelines, it has higher rates of poverty than the national average within those district boundaries. So that is one of the triggers that can move forward projects to look at through the Redevelopment Authority. It includes the Shawtown neighborhood and some of the older homes in that area that have the potential for redevelopment or changing of the properties. And then the pink areas are the remnants of the qualified census tracts that are located in the area. So again, North Crossing, bounding along the river, and then cutting across through a portion of 3rd Ward, running up Old Hastings Way, and then across and cutting back down. The areas that we cut out in that northeast corner, mostly new houses. So no need to include those areas in. You're unlikely to see any type of real need within there. So let's go ahead and flip over to the plan itself. It's 11 pages, so I'm not going to go through it all, page by page anyway. Let's just kind of start with the introduction. Again, defining the district is what we're looking to do. Establish how we establish under Wisconsin statute for creating business improvement districts. This core area identifies that there are high rates of poverty, has levels of blight, and identifies the qualified census tracts as part of the reasons for looking at this district as a potential area for action by the RDA. It also lists the framework for what the RDA is intending to do. Blight conditions, identifying and removing blight conditions, and then looking to grow our housing needs for residents earning less than county median income, which is what we are looking to do within this district. The district is focused more on affordable housing as a primary. We identify that this is different than the previous RDA districts, as this is a much broader district. This will be the largest by far that the RDA has approved or put forward to council for council approval up to date. It also identifies that the process will be much more selective. It's not a typical RDA district where we look to acquire blocks and chunks of property, clear it all, and make it all go out. It's intended to be more selective on a property by property analysis basis. Move down. These are just the boundary descriptions. Within the next section, it's simply listing out the boundary map, the street with borders, and so let's go ahead and slide on down past all of these. Again, that's just narrative of the boundaries. Land use, again, identifies diverse underutilized land, QCTs, pockets of legal nonconforming properties that even in our new zoning code are still nonconforming due to the size of the lots. Some of these going way, way back, the time before we even had zoning codes, as potential targets or potential project areas. We did reference there will be some commercial, selective commercial redevelopment. We did reference 2 specific commercial buildings that are within this district that could become RDA targets. One is an abandoned dry cleaner on Seaver Street in Graham. Has a lot of issues. It's deteriorating. It is your typical dry cleaner that has brownfield concerns. So that is a potential target for the RDA. We also referenced the Wisconsin HVAC's building. It's the former meatpacking plant just outside the current cannery district. Talking to the owner, that building is not likely going to stay there forever. It has a lot of structural issues on the east end and the north end where they're not using it. So it becomes a potential target on the commercial side for this district. But again, not looking to do huge swaths of space like we have in the past. If you want to scroll back down, just hitting some of the environmental features. Some of the things we deal, there's river frontage along the Chippewa River. We have floodplain issues in a number of spaces, particularly in the 4th Street area along the Chippewa River. So there are some environmental concerns that go in along with that as well. This brings into account bank stabilization, things of that nature that have to be concerned about when you talk about redeveloping these regions. Again, looking at socioeconomics, kind of touches on what's there. These districts, including the QCTs, they house what are our current light tech projects, some older, 2 recently within the last 7 years. We also see a lot of what's referred to as NOAA, naturally occurring affordable housing. That's the housing in historic Randall Park neighborhood, some of the housing north of Madison Street in between the river and the bluff where Eau Claire Academy is. These are old homes that are, some of them poorly kept, landlords who just kind of keep them functional at most, but provide a very low-cost housing for folks who are low income. So again, this is what this area looks like from a socioeconomic standpoint. Again, let's scroll on down. We again hit the need for development or redevelopment. We touch on the theme that has been for this broad district, which is selective redevelopment of properties, particularly those that are becoming uninhabitable. As an example, we have 40 raise order requests from the health department, roughly between 30 and 40 raise orders from the city county health department, buildings and structures that have exceeded they are no longer safe to be habitable. these are the types of properties that could be looked at. We are looking at how to identify vacant properties that are setting idle, whether it's land or houses. We have a number of complaints within this district from properties where the house has been vacant. It's an out-of-state owner who inherited it when a grandparent or parent passed. They've not done anything with it other than pay the taxes. One of the homes in the district, with the recent calls we received from that were the neighbor who owns the adjacent property complained that somebody kicked in the door and we're squatting in it. And nobody knows. It becomes a police issue. It becomes community services issue or neighborhood services issue. So there are select properties that can be addressed throughout this district to look to remediate some of those conditions. And those types of things are listed within this section and the need for redevelopment. And what the goals would be in terms of stimulating new housing, bringing properties back up on the tax roll in good standing, et cetera. Touching a little bit on the economic development pieces again, we're looking at mixed use and commercial development in some areas where appropriate, otherwise strong focus on housing and residential development. And we are specifying the ability for redevelopment to increase density, improve conditions, and create diverse housing types, variety of housing price points for a variety of residents and income levels. Looking at sustainability and resilience. Probably not going to see much need for this, but we include the language because we're not looking at larger clearing like we have in the past with the RDA, so you're not having to worry about stormwater management systems or things like that. These are units that will already be in place, and all that is mostly in place. But we do include that in the chance that there's a redevelopment that needs to occur that does have to address any stormwater concerns or drainage concerns. Summary of key redevelopment objectives are listed there. Scrolling down, the future land use map, again, kind of identifies the map that we are included, the boundary district. We'll be incorporating components of the comprehensive plan. That is one of the documents that becomes a base for what this looks at. What's the comp plan identify? And the comp plan is going to be getting modified and updated in 2026. That becomes a guidepost for some of these development activities that are going in these areas. The implementation strategy, again, we're just talking about property acquisition and the basic 3 types of redevelopment as we see, or 4 types that we see happening within this district. The potential to achieve rental units by potentially having the Housing Authority manage those as turnkey on behalf of the RDA. So this organization will be hands-off. We let the folks who do this every day do that on behalf of the RDA. Infill home ownership, renovation projects were appropriate with the appropriate partners, and again, market rate multifamily development, again, where appropriate. That would be analyzing sites on a case-by-case basis. Again, functioning, just identifying that the activities of the RDA may include demolition, which they have in the past. We've done a lot of demo work in the Cannery District, in the North Barstow District, so that has definitely been a part of what the RDA has done in districts past. Looking at financing tools, these are just the common tools that we have seen used to help advance projects. CIP, that is where the RDA's budget comes from. Potential for tax increment financing, any state federal grants, private partnerships were appropriate. Let's go ahead and scroll on down. Again, identifying potential partners or partner types. Phasing and coordination. This one's pretty straightforward. This would be an ongoing process or an ongoing phase. It doesn't necessarily have until all of the blight is removed in this district. There's not necessarily an end date to this district. It is continue to operate as long as it's needed and as long as there are properties that could benefit from the RDA's involvement in redevelopment. The financial plan, again, looking at identifying estimated costs on a project-by-project basis. This is a little different than others where they've had some defined projects and they identify we're going to see X amount of capital investment in redevelopment growth over the life of the district, as this is more spot and identifying projects as we move through. We left that a little more of a statement and a goal as opposed to a defined, we're going to see X amount of capital investment, X amount of expenditures to purchase, that type of thing. Again, same with the estimated costs. Will be identified for the board on a project-by-project basis before action is taken on any given site. funding sources, again, we list the same type of things. Fiscal impact, again, just generally it's what these projects could potentially do. The job creation really leans towards those that would be potential commercial redevelopment. Otherwise, it's more about tax base and providing housing and homes for folks who need. Let's go and scroll, continue down. Evaluation and monitoring, we're just looking at identifying and removing key blighted structures that have been identified by the RDA and our various partners who do these types of analysis. We see housing being built back into those spaces, whether it's something directly done through the RDA or these spaces spun off to an appropriate partner in the community who then does that as part of their work. We also see riverfront restoration, public access. With the riverfront on part of this, that becomes something that could be projects the RDA could take on to help open that up or to improve that type of access. So we have left that in there. And then the entertaining property values. Take a vacant, empty lot, and suddenly there's a nice affordable housing project that has a positive tax impact base to the community. Monitoring process, it will be reporting to the RDA, not just what we are looking to do moving forward is like an annual report of what we've been doing through the whole year within these spaces, but also the ongoing reporting that we do at every meeting on a monthly basis. And the appendices just include the maps that we are looking to go through that will be part of the exhibitions. So for this process, if there's any revisions or changes you'd like to see made to this, we can start noting those for today and taking those forward and do a redraft and can bring it back in November. If you are comfortable with this format, we can go to legal directly, have legal review it and ensure that the language is correct. We have everything we need to meet the statute requirements for the RDA. We would bring this document back in November for formal adoption by the board, and then we'd plan on taking this to council in December. If we do need to make other adjustments or changes that pushes that, we can push everything forward and plan on taking this to council for review and approval in January if need be. At this point, I'd open up for any questions.
Thank you. As you were going through it, I was just wondering, we've got a number of plans. I know you mentioned the COP plan, but just other long-term planning documents that the city has invested in and maintains, et cetera. Is there any need or benefit to referencing those plans or including like a link to them in the appendices just as it relates to the plan or like the long-term vision for this section of the city?
It's something we can actually amend and add to at a later date. There within the budget, there are plans to do some small core like broader neighborhood plans. There's an urban plan, downtown urban plan. That is something that's projected to come forward, and we can incorporate those. Or if a neighborhood, a particular neighborhood district chooses to adopt something that more defines their neighborhood, we can update these and add those. We can bring that to the RDA and we can upload those and add that as an appendix to or an amendment to this district on the fly. Otherwise, we're using the primary tools, zoning, which is required, and then the comprehensive plan, which is will be a document, a modified document moving forward as well.
Sure. I just, in particular, I had a couple that I was thinking of, but in particular, the regional housing study, I think, I guess it's less specific to this geographic piece,
actually, it's excellent.
And then, I can send you an email with some of the other plans I was thinking of, just in case there's other relevant ties. But my one piece of feedback would be I like it a lot, and by nature of, I think, the vision of what this district would be, it's pretty vague and not specific, and so that's where I think having maybe references to some other plans that have a little bit more specificity around, kind of the needs and goals would be helpful for me personally.
We can definitely put some references in the housing study, the 2022 housing study.
First of all, thanks for, this is great, putting it together, really nice to have it laid out like this. Could you kind of confirm with me, the bullets you have on the property acquisition, we have affordable rental units and infill home ownership. As I read those seem to be things that the RDA, the rental units the RDA is going to own.
We would own, the idea would be that the RDA would have ownership at least temporarily, and that the housing authority would assume all management on behalf of the RDA. So they would treat it as if it's one of their 300 units of public housing already on their list. They will do income qualification verifications. They will handle all tenant management. They will handle all maintenance through their team that already handles 300 units of housing in the community. They would simply submit a bill monthly that the RDA would cover costs. The RDA would collect the rent, which they would also collect on behalf of us and act as our property manager. They would collect rents, they would manage the properties. Again, these look to be new rentals, so there should be minimal maintenance, at least in the start. Yeah, you would. I know. I'm trying to be positive on that. They would correct any maintenance issues, and then we would simply invest and bill those out of the funds that are coming from the rent, and they would also take an administrative fee. The idea would be after ownership for a period of time, we need to determine. We have yet to determine exactly how long that should be, and we could look at that on a project-by-project basis. We would likely turn these over to the housing authority to assume ownership at some point in time. I would say within 5 to 7 years, more than likely. So it would be a shorter-term ownership before it's turned over to the housing authority or shifted onto their ledger in a manner that we would need to be determined through a memorandum of understanding.
So the RDA would expand kind of our role, because now we would be hiring contractors, architects, designing and building buildings within the sites that
We're looking to focus solely on manufactured housing.
for the rental units too?
We have determined under our code now allows for accessory dwelling units, and we have found a design through multiple manufacturer home codes that are they're tended to be ADUs. They are about 550 square feet, and they are turnkey that's placed on a slab, connected to utilities the same way manufactured home does. Our code doesn't specify that the principal has to be bigger than the ADU when they're detached. If it's attached to the home has to be at least it could only be 40% of the home. Say you add on to your house to make an ADU, it can't be more than 40% of the size of your home. But we can put 2 of these ADU units on a single parcel property that would fit on a parcel intended for single-family homes. Designate one as the primary, one as the ADU, shared driveway. We can place them both as new units, and we'd have to go through an RFP process. We would specify the RFP as that the provider of the manufactured homes would also have to be the general contractor, so they would oversee everything. We would have a staff liaison who would manage the project from our end, but these would be built and set and turned over to the RDA as turnkey units. There'd be no design requirements, no building. You're talking slab, utilities, and we are looking, we can do these on city properties or, acquired properties where it's a vacant lot or a blighted structure that's torn down. Can be done that way.
I think my question about it is, purchasing land and then letting people come in and do this is different than purchasing land and becoming a landlord. And I guess from my perspective, I see that as outside the scope of the RDA's work. Maybe from city's perspective, it's the only organization who could do it. But instead of saying it's going to be us and the housing authority, are we better off saying, okay, the RDA would buy land just like it would normally buy land and go out to RFP to see if anybody else in the community might want to do this type of work, and then work with the housing authority? Or is there somewhere else in the city where being a landlord makes more sense than it does at the RDA level?
So part of the reason for the city taking initiative and doing this and working with the housing authority is that is the one organization that we can guarantee will provide permanent affordability on any parcel. That doesn't require deed restrictions and using tools that hinder the land to try and keep it affordable down the road. The RDA or the housing authority, that's all they can do. That is all they're allowed to do is affordable housing, meeting the folks that are on public housing needs. So that entity managing it on our behalf is a guaranteed way that the city is delivering an affordability level that we have targeted. There's no other entity that can deliver that except for another housing authority or CHOTO. So that's the primary reason we look to do this. The other communities do have RDAs that do ownership of this, not necessarily this thing, but do have some ownership levels. Oftentimes they are arranged as community development authorities as opposed to redevelopment authorities. So there is a difference. We haven't even talked about, is that something that should be looked at for, changing this organization to the CDA model instead of the RDA model? But that's a later discussion at this point in time. So it's not unprecedented for an RDA. It's new for this community to do this. We have held land for decades in the past, but we have not held, and we have held structures for extended periods of time, and we act as a landlord in preparation for demolition. The Cannery District's the primary example. A number of the parcels that were purchased in the Cannery District had some very dilapidated residentials there. I'm not sure how long Deputy City Manager Solberg might know the length of time, because we owned those when I came here, but I know for 2 or 3 years at least, we owned and managed those as rentals, and staff actually collected the rents and took care of that until we got the folks moved out and were able to tear the buildings down.
Yeah, I think it was a couple of years, and it was active property management, because before the renters were done with their lease, I think there was roof repairs, there was a HVAC issue. I mean, it wasn't a very pleasant experience, but yeah, we owned and operated that. The one question maybe, Aaron, you can help answer is, instead of the RDA buying and putting the homes up, why is that a better model than giving the land, kind of the Pam's thing, to the housing authority and having them put the homes up with assistance?
Part of it is revenue, being able to get them put in place and get them in a position where they can then pick them up. They are struggling with budgets as well as everybody else. We have funding available to do this now. They do not. They would have to go out and borrow directly to do this. And trying to deliver the housing that we're looking to do at a level would be challenging them to service debt, plus cover their maintenance costs, plus cover their admin costs. This is a way to let them add some numbers to their units. And we're not looking to use a large chunk of our budget to do this. We think a few units, particularly as a test bed, to see how well these work, how well these fit as a piece of affordable housing, and then put in a mechanism that turns these over to them over time. So it's a way to help move some of these projects forward. Like I said, the Housing Authority does have borrowing capacity the same way as they do, but to hit some of the folks that have the lowest income levels that are on their waiting list, it's challenging to put any type of new structure in place to do something like that. Grant funding, we're looking at routes for grant funding to move this in a much bigger direction, but with the unsettledness that's going on in DC at a number of the departments, particularly in housing and urban development, we're not counting on any grant capacity anytime soon. So this is a way to try and advance some housing models forward, see how they work, provide feedback on how they work, and see if this is a model we want to pursue on a much bigger scale. We're actually talking to some other communities in the Chippewa Valley. How can we leverage the need amongst ourselves in Altoona and other communities to try and do this regional leverage for local community needs?
So, go ahead.
No, yeah, I think you were first.
So, 2 things. One, with respect to that process of turning them over to the Housing Authority, if they're constrained in their financing now, do we see something different down the road that would allow them to purchase, or are we talking about just simply transitioning it and making an expenditure from the RDA side to fund Housing Authority?
We would capture the revenue coming from them, so without any financing costs, we would be capturing the rent, and then a portion of that would be paid back out for maintenance and their admin, but the rest would be retained to help offset the initial investment. That gives time for them to also look at whether the grant funding comes forward. They have housing stock that needs, they have housing that they're using, public housing built in the 1800s. So there may be an opportunity for them to shift properties off of their docket into private redevelopment or private hands and allow them to do some changing down the road. That's why we think this is a way to, it may be that we don't recapture all of the costs coming back, but there's an opportunity for us to capture some of the initial startup costs back through a portion of the rents that would be coming through.
The other question was one that I raised at a prior meeting where we talked about it, and that was the question of the tax base. In this plan, we talked about building our real estate tax base or property tax base, and for either those things that are held by RDA or under Housing Authority, are those exempt or are they taxed? How is that handled?
So in these cases, they would be tax exempt as they're owned by the RDA. Well, no, actually, I'd have to double check, see if the RDA is taxing that. I'm not sure that it is. As an organization, I can check on that. Corey, do you know
To
within
that
our
point,
budget, do
even
we
the
pay property tax
low-income
on any of the RDA
All the
properties?
housing we're proposing
We
is
don't?
low tax
Okay.
bases.
So Corey confirmed they would be tax exempt even under the RDA during that period of ownership.
I was just gonna say that with the innovation funds and some of the changes out of Madison, I don't know if this is something that could qualify since it does overlap with the housing division and the housing authority. So that might be something to look into too, that would help offset some of the initial cost of it since it's combining work efforts between two, in one particular area between two agencies.
We've already had discussions with our finance director about that very program. So we're looking a lot. There's a HUD program called Choice Neighborhoods that we are looking strongly at. We think we could put together, the housing authority with assistance from the city could put together a very strong application for that. Waiting to see if it actually gets funded through HUD. We've also been talking to WEDA, how any of the WEDA programs, that's WHEDA, Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development Authority, could come into play. So there are some other state programs that we could potentially use to help with these and could see these transition to the housing authority on a very timely basis. But this will allow us to get started and try some new housing types. Again, this is something nobody's tried before, so we're looking to see how it works.
Thank you. I can tell there's been a lot of work put into this, so I appreciate that. I guess I have the same concerns. I don't know that the RDA is really structured to be a landlord in our capacity, maybe in other areas, but so that would, I guess, be my concern. But also the housing authority, how many properties do they manage today? Do they have the capacity to take on more?
They have 300 properties under their management today, and they do have the capacity to manage and do more. It's funding that holds them back from doing more properties as it is. And a lot of them are extremely high maintenance properties. So new structures like this would minimize what they have to bring on. There's probably 30 or 40 on their list that are extremely high maintenance because you're talking about units that are built late 1800s, early 1900s that require a lot of work.
So there's 30 to 40 that have been recognized that need to be raised. Is there tenants in those properties?
There are. They're not doing anything with them now. They're just a high maintenance cost. I think long-term they have visions of being able to try to replace those housing with newer housing stock. That's less maintenance and lower cost overall for operations, or potentially full renovations at some point in time. Biggest challenges is housing types that they need. They have 700 people on the public housing waiting list today. And they have 60 to 65% of them need a studio apartment or a one-bedroom apartment type of home. So what we're talking about with the dual ADU system hits their core wait list to be able to do that. Now, as they see other housing projects come forward, they might be able to transition some of those other housing stocks into hands. They still have some that are needed multi-bedroom for families that are in their programming. But if they can shift some of their inventory around that they'd like to do, like I said, increase their housing stock overall. There's probably some folks that are in spaces bigger than what they really need, but that's what they had. So they can make sure that their folks are right-sized within a unit that fits what the tenant needs. There's ways to help improve some efficiencies on what they do.
I know there are some private investors that are out there that do work within the HUD and WEDA space and knowledgeable in that space. Have you had any conversation with any of those private investors that, can come in after the RDA has purchased the land, demoed it, to come in and take on any of these projects that we're talking about?
We could look at that. The bigger challenge
There's
is
not a lot of them, but I know there are some.
The bigger challenge is maintaining affordability. So typically it has to be done with a deed restriction to require them to cap rents for 30 years. A lot of groups won't do that or don't want to do that because it then makes challenges if they have to turn the property or do things with the property. It can make challenges for them to finance the property when you're carrying a deed restriction that restricts what can happen with that space. It makes it challenging for outside groups, particularly private groups, to do things like that. It's not insurmountable. Community land trusts are a tool that can work to help do that, and there are some folks that are working on creating community land trusts that could be good partners. We see some of the opportunity for like redevelopment of spaces. Those other infill lots and those things, those aren't intended for the RDA to own at all. The infill lots, we have some spaces that manufactured housing can fit as a turnkey, and our expectation would be to put a replacement home in there and sell it off for homeownership with income restriction and getting it into as an affordable level, and then it's off our table like any other type of development, other than we're going a little further than just selling a dirt lot. But again, we can quantify what goes in there and help drive some different housing types. The redevelopment pieces, the renovation pieces that we talked about, that would be something that we would look to turn that property over to a partner completely and let them do what they do, whether that's somebody like Habitat for Humanity, Over Good does renovations. Those are great projects for those types of organizations to work a deal to turn those over to them immediately, and they handle those from the ground up. They're the only one that would have any length of time of ownership would be that rental unit. And again, the intent would be to have the housing authority under an agreement, a signed agreement confirmed by both organizations to manage that completely on behalf of the RDA.
I think my only other thought on this right now is, first, I understand the affordable housing need, so please understand as it's in here, I certainly know what the housing authority and everyone is looking for. I think there's two different things that I'm struggling with of what are we approving. I think approving an RDA redevelopment site is one piece of that, and I thought that's where we were going. I think kind of this now affordable changing of the RDA and what we currently do, my preference would be to pull that out and truly take a look at, is this the role of the RDA? And if it is, then let's reset kind of the overall charter of this organization to be the landlord. And then as long as this is going into council, my question is if this is a priority by the city and the council is engaged in this, then we need to look at the housing authority's budget. And are we better off asking for them to fund the housing authority so that we clear the land like we would always do, but then allow the housing authority to be able to have the dollars to come in and just be the landlord from the get-go? So I think there's opportunities to have two different conversations. So from my perspective today, I'm not interested in approving a new RDA that has all of this other stuff that needs to be unpacked in it.
Yeah, I will say that they can't fund the housing authority. That is not a city entity. The city has representation on it. Our housing division manager also serves as the executive director for the housing authority. But as a separate organization, it is a nonprofit organization. It is not a city entity, and we can't fund them.
Then I think then we'd have to relook at the mission and the charter of what we're currently doing if we wanted to go that direction.
Agree with a lot of what's been said, so thank you for the thoughtful comments. I have a few things that I want to add on to. One of them is a boundary question that I'll send you a specific street just to kind of make sure we're getting everything. I'd love to see. Well, maybe I'll start with relating to existing plans was a great conversation, and I think what's missing is that the existing plans, like the housing study, don't have really anything for us to latch on to. There's no metrics in those that are really like, what are we shooting for? And I think that's kind of what I was hoping to see in this. It's sort of like identifying those existing conditions within the district and then tying the key performance metrics to those. So like, are we looking for, in this area, are we looking for a certain percentage of owner-occupied housing? Are we looking for a certain number of affordable units? We don't know what maybe we do, but I haven't seen it. Just what a number of affordable units do we quote unquote need in the community? And so, are there other neighborhood preservation goals, and maybe even quantifying better kind of the blighted properties within the district? So again, just wanting specific metrics that we can tie to our existing conditions, because
going to that phasing and coordination, I want to know when we're done with this. Maybe there's a sunset of 20 years, but something where we're saying, all right, just because this is different than, say, like the North Barstow redevelopment district or Cannery, where you can look at it and say, all right, all the properties have been touched, we're done. You know, in this, I don't like the idea of a redevelopment district in perpetuity. Like, I think that this needs to, again, tie to very specific goals and metrics that are then also related to the housing study, comp plan, and those things, where we can say, what's our vision for this district? And again, know when we're done. So a lot of my thoughts are around wanting to see much more specificity on that and those key performance metrics. And so that how that can tie into phasing and coordination, I'd love to see some more thought put into at least calling out windows of time or just describing that a bit better so that we can, again, know what we're, I think that would add a lot of confidence to knowing what we're doing over that period of time. I have similar concerns with the Housing Authority partnership and thinking of the RDA as an entity that's intending to increase tax value within the community. There certainly are competing affordability goals with that. So that's, again, more that we should be looking at specific metrics for. And then I think it would be great to get this reviewed by legal starting now to then, just make sure we're hitting the statutory things. And would it be inappropriate to send this for feedback from HOC, the Housing Opportunities Commission? If this is a affordable housing focused redevelopment district, then it'd be great to make sure that we're in alignment on those goals and metrics. So that's my laundry list of thoughts, but happy to send those too.
Sure. So we have talked to Hawk about this, particularly some of the replacement housing types on a couple of instances. We haven't presented this as a whole formal district plan, but we have had discussions with them about that and see some general support from there. They definitely see a need in getting some housing projects moving forward. The housing study, there's really, it didn't deliver what we would have hoped it would have, which was you need to make X number of housing starts annually to keep up with growth. And there's the housing price points that you're missing. It didn't go into that detail. The past two housing studies I did in other communities did. This one did not. The one metric they did reference within the report is that we are not addressing housing for folks making 50% median county income or less. And that is squarely what falls under what the Housing Authority works in. So they hit the one metric that was mentioned in the housing report is squarely under the purview of the Housing Authority. We didn't reference like how many housing types we want to do and how many we're going to do 10 number of units over 10 years at this price point. I tried to avoid those types of metrics because when you start placing very specific quantity numbers in a redevelopment, then you start trying to force projects that maybe don't fit because it's in the plan, so we're going to make it fit. The idea is to evaluate the parcels for what's best use. If it's an area, say it's a non-conforming lot that would be difficult to build a replacement house on, that's when we can look at a ADU rental situation where it'd be challenging to build a replacement home within that space because of code conformities or whatnot. Some units, it might be very suitable for renovation, so we do renovation on this one, whereas this one is sitting on a raised order. It needs to be a ground-up redo and an infill. Another one, it might be in an area that's already doing very well, so we don't need to look at income-qualified housing. This is a good spot for a market rate project. And we would turn it over to a partner who would do a market. We would spin it out for redevelopment by somebody who'd look to do a market rate project, but again, delivering something that's new to the community, something that's more affordable than the $400,000 homes that are getting built in subdivisions today. So that's the reason we didn't put any specific metrics. If you have some ideas of how you would like that structured, feel free to send it to me. We can draft some of that in. If you'd like to see some benchmarking. From a review standpoint, we could specify that the performance is reviewed every 5 years as a full plan review. Because if you look at the Cannery District's been operational for going on 20 years as a district. and we're still not done redeveloping it. So we could put in a metric to review it as a full plan and broad impacts periodically at whatever interval the board would like to see.
Yeah, that sounds really good. Thank you. And yeah, we can chat offline more about some specific things. And maybe I'm the only one, but I think what I want to avoid is the we know it when we see it type of project where, okay, this is a project that needs to happen, and okay, so it just kind of generally fits the idea of redevelopment. I'd like us to, as a community, be a bit more focused on here's what we need numbers-wise, so that we can say, yeah, it's not to make a project fit that maybe doesn't fit in that space, but just to know as a community, we're going to prioritize affordable units at this price point, at this number, because this is what our studies say that we need. And so that's what we're trying to achieve, I think. And so balancing that with the flexibility of being able to identify properties or have properties come to the RDA for opportunity later on, I think those are both laudable goals.
Yeah, I agree, Ray. That's a great point. Even to have a, benchmarking of all the different goals that the city is and communities have that we can look at and see where they're at.
And I would, I like that comment too, Ray. I would just say that, the housing study came out in 2022, and we're a very different city now. I don't know if there's any ways to update those numbers with metrics or whatnot. I mean, we've had our turbo growth has kicked in since then, and same with the unhoused population that you can visibly see. And I would have to assume the numbers of the housing stressed have increased also, over what they were in 2022.
If you can convince Director Winters to give me the budget, we can definitely update the housing study. It's something I wouldn't mind doing simply because there are better metrics that they could have put in. This particular company that was selected doesn't do them. Like I said, studies I worked in the past, the prime example, the community in Hayes, their study when it came out said your missing block is houses between $140,000 and $180,000 as sold, and you need to build 90 units per year, new starts, to keep up with projected population growth. 135 units per year when you take into account the university's projected population growth. I was hoping to get those sort of benchmarks, and the consultant we used kind of snubbed their nose at delivering those types of metrics.
We want that study.
Yeah, that's what we would like to have seen. That's what I really hoped would come out of it, and I tried to nudge them. That was before I was in this role. I tried to nudge them in that way, and yeah, they didn't bite.
I do really like the idea of sharing this plan now that it's drafted with Hawk for feedback. I think their next meeting will be in early to mid-November, maybe November 12th. So I would be really supportive of sharing this with them. And I don't necessarily think that the Hawk commissioners are going to be able to give us specific stats, but I do think that they might be able to give us general benchmarks and feedback on some of the criteria that you mentioned, Ray, or Commissioner French. And so I'd be supportive of having Hawk take a look.
Any other comments, questions for Aaron?
All right, we'll do some revisions and bring a copy back for November for review.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next one, I'm going to turn it over to Kendall to talk about the Riverside District, which had previously been referred to as the Northwest Quadrant. And I'll run the mouse for you.
Good morning, RDA members. I believe I've met all of you, but I'm Kendall Williams with the Economic Development Division. So here we have what we're now calling the Riverbend District. Previously it was the Southwest Quadrant Industrial District. It's gone through a few different variations of names, but for now we've landed on Riverbend for marketability and because it follows that southern bend in the Chippewa River. These are the boundaries. They haven't changed since the last time you've seen them. They follow the river along the north. They come back down towards the Sacred Heart Hospital site along West MacArthur Avenue, behind the Shopko site, and then along that industrial quadrant there on the west side. If you want to pull up the plan. This is a more traditional, I haven't opened it yet.
Oh, yeah.
This is a more traditional RDA district, so hopefully we won't open any housing discussions in this one, but we can fly through this draft of the redevelopment plan. It is a little bit longer, and it has a few more specific definitions of, say, like phasing and timeline, so we'll get there. Just like the last plan, it follows the exact same template, so this is the introduction outlining the boundaries and the purpose of this plan. Keep going, I won't go through the specifics of most of this. This is also the boundary description laying out in a paragraph format of what the boundaries along each street will be, the district context, talking about how it's visible right here on Claremont Avenue. We obviously want to make sure that since it's so prominent here within the city, that we're very careful about what developments go in here as we're thinking about redevelopment. Again, we go through the boundary map again. And existing conditions, we talk about land use, that it's diverse but underutilized, especially along that industrial quadrant. Can you pull up the land use map? I haven't opened that yet either. So this land use map, if you see the legend along the bottom, it shows what the different colors mean. But we wanted to show you within this district what's planned for future land use within the comp plan. This came directly from the planning division, so you'll see that orange section over there on the west side is planned to be mixed use. I believe red is the commercial. Currently, the white color is the industrial area. And then green is parks and housing. And then you can go back to the plan. So we talk about some of the land use here, if you want to scroll down. The building conditions, obviously we talk about that Shopko Plaza building a little bit, the Sacred Heart Hospital facility. And I do want to say, since this was drafted in September, that property has been acquired by a private developer. So you may see this next draft, specifically with the Sacred Heart Hospital site. The language may change quite a bit just based on that development. We talk about some of the infrastructure right here, the streets, environmental features, especially along that industrial area. There will be some environmental cleanup that will need to be done. The socioeconomic context, that it's, again, at a high visibility corridor with significant potential for new jobs, especially in those two commercial districts. Potentially some more mixed-use housing options near the Station 99 Apartments building. Then we go through the need for redevelopment in this area, that it clearly, specific sites meet the definition of blight under the statute. We talk about the physical deterioration of some of the major buildings again, the two big sites. If you want to keep going. We're at a point within this district that if there's not public intervention, we probably won't see those sites redeveloped as quickly as we want, so we do break that down a little bit. We also go into redevelopment objectives for this area, including transforming the underutilized and obsolete properties into what we hope will be a vibrant mixed-use corridor that supports more economic growth, more housing options, and reconnects the community along the Chippewa River on that side of town to some of these mixed-use developments. Within this district, we're also considering it a potential innovation area. Not sure how familiar you are with what other cities within Wisconsin are doing with things like innovation parks or innovation buildings, or there's specifically one that just opened in Kenosha. That is a huge flagship mixed-use innovation building that's a hub for startups and technology companies, integrated with office, retail, housing, test kitchens, everything we might need for supporting the startups. That's been identified as a gap here within Eau Claire, that we could use some of those facilities. And I do want to say these are nothing has been discussed outside of just this list of potential uses we could see for this area. There are no plans or anything. So these are just ideas for what could go in some of these sites. We already have some movement in the Research and Medical Technology Park related to the Sacred Heart Hospital with HeartWorks, I believe, opening in Sky Park. That's a medical research company, so there could be potential for more companies like that to move within that Sacred Heart Hospital site. We could see it redeveloped as an innovation space along with the medical technology park. We could also see, this is a long shot, but maybe this is where our winter sports facility that Eau Claire needs to replace Hobbs could end up somewhere within this district too. So we did just list very generic descriptions of what the potential uses of these areas could be on these sites. We also talk about the housing and residential development, the public realm connectivity, specifically along the river on the north side and in that industrial space. We already talked about the sustainability and resilience, community and cultural enhancement, providing more recreational, cultural, and educational opportunities through any facilities that are built, encouraging more public-private partnerships within this area. Then there's a summary of key redevelopment objectives, just like the last plan, activating underutilized and obsolete properties, developing those two major sites, providing more housing, enhancing access to the river. So again, going through all of that. Proposed land use. These are very generic descriptions of some of those major sites based on the future land use map. We kept them very generic just because we don't want to be too specific in what we're looking for. You never know what developer could come in and have different ideas than what we are even imagining. So these are very generic. We talk about the former Shopco site, again, the Sacred Heart Hospital site, and then that industrial area, riverfront parcels. Design standards just reference the zoning code, a little bit of what we're wanting to see as far as design. Implementation strategy is a little more specific than the last plan because there are some major swaths, big properties in that industrial space specifically that we may need to pursue acquisition to get that riverfront redevelopment done. If you want to scroll down. Keep going. We outlined demolition potential of those two major sites. Public improvements engineering has already identified some parts of those frontage roads along Claremont Avenue that need to be reconfigured based on traffic flows. Riverfront trail connections that could be made to continue the usage of the Chippewa River Trail. Stormwater and utility upgrades that need to be made in this area. Then we go into financing tools, again, like the last plan. I won't break those down. Partnerships. These are defined a little more specifically than the last plan because we're looking at potential, innovation, parks and health and recreation partners that we might need. Phasing and coordination, phasing and timeline are broken down a little more closely to what you were talking about, Ray, in the last plan. This one has short-term, midterm, and long-term. Again, you're probably going to see this change quite a bit in the next draft just based on the acquisition of the Sacred Heart Hospital site, but there's some more specific language about what we would like to see happen in the short-term, midterm, and long-term with especially those three major sites within this district. And then by the end, we're hoping for full build-out of all three. I want to keep going down. Financial plans, we did leave, we haven't put an estimate, obviously, of the estimated redevelopment, or public investment that will be required for this district. But we're working on that. It may switch to more generic language to be project by project again, but for now, we gave you an overview of the estimated costs, or at least what they would be used for, along with funding sources. You want to scroll down? Fiscal impact, again, we'd like to estimate what this could be, but we don't have an estimate quite yet. But we're hoping it achieves the vision of the plan while maintaining financial sustainability, leveraging the TIF grants, private capital, and any municipal resources that we can to get this redevelopment done. Evaluation and monitoring, this is broken down a little more specifically than the last plan. Obviously, we'd like to see removal of those obsolete buildings, housing development, tracking, any mixed-use developments that go up, the number of housing units that go up, any increase of trail mileage, we want to track that as well, and new recreational amenities, as well as obviously the economic and fiscal impact, job growth, and new tax base that has been generated from it. And then just like the last plan monitoring process, we were hoping for annual reporting, and then looking at this every few years to see what progress we're making. We do have a few more maps that we'll including like floodplain. You see the land use map in this one already, hoping to include that with the other plan. But I will leave it there and open it up for questions. Aaron and I can both answer.
Has there been any conversation or cooperation from the current owner of the Shopco?
No, the only thing we do know is that apparently he is on parole from prison and is still non-communicative to anybody about anything on that facility. The TID 16 plan, the district that shows that, does identify Shopco being acquired, removed, and a connection road from, I believe it's Richard to the frontage road going through that space. So that is part of the infrastructure plan at TID 16. But we have not had any active communication with the owner at all. Refuses phone calls. There's 2 other developers have called and tried to buy the site from them, including Gray Wolf Partners, who owns Station 955, would buy it in a heartbeat. They offered it 2 or 3 times during the construction phase and non-responsive.
Do we have other options to acquire that property?
Yes. The RDA does have condemnation authority, so it is something that the city has never used, or the RDA has never used or invoked, but it is something that could be utilized, and perhaps this is the project that does that. But it would be a tool that's an option. If it's for infrastructure, the city has obviously eminent domain to be able to move, if a new street's coming through there for public use, then the city has routes to do that as well as a city-driven initiative. I
believe there's just one tenant in that property, and it belongs to the owner. Is there?
Correct. Currently, although, no, actually there are 2. The owner has the retail vape shop, which is his space. I believe Planned Parenthood is still in there.
Sure. Yeah.
But they are the only, we have seen some permits. There's potentially a laundromat going in there where we have seen some construction permits for one of the spaces. They need to upgrade a few things related to infrastructure to handle that. But yeah, the tenants have left. Major structural issues with the tenants who did pull out. We've heard a lot of reports from Digicop and some of the owners that there were major issues with those buildings.
I know, Kendall, you mentioned the conversation of the changes with Sacred Heart. I'm assuming we've had conversations now that Sacred Heart has been purchased by a developer around what their needs might be or what might be left.
Correct. We have met with multiple times and have been talking with the developer for actually a couple, 3 months, even before the transition was completed. We've walked through the building, including Mr. Solberg, myself, and 2 of our inspectors walked through the building with the new owner 2 weeks ago, I believe, to look at facilities. They have several different ways they could try to do that. They think there may be some portions of the building that can be saved and can be used as standalone with demolition occurring on the rest. He has models to demo the entire site and scrape it to do something else. There could be a number of ways to go about that. The RDA may or may not play a role in any of those as it moves forward. It just really depends on what ultimately they think they can come in, as Kendall indicated. And I really want to shout out, Kendall did pretty much all the work on this one. Did some fantastic work putting this together. But yeah, we've always kept in the district because there could be a role for the RDA to play if needed. But it's to be determined whether there is any involvement in that at all. Right now, we're just thinking at most the city might be looking at pedestrian and vehicle alterations on flow by street changes as that property redesigns and redevelops. Maybe it's eliminating a frontage road, changing route accesses or things like that through there, which would be typical city infrastructure assistance. But anything that moves forward than that have to be determined, and what's the appropriate vehicle to make it happen.
Any other comments, questions regarding this plan? Go ahead, Rick.
Thanks. I'm just going to broadly say, well, first, I think this captures a lot of what we've talked about for this district, so that this is a very, very great start. I'm going to say a lot of my earlier comments I think would apply to this plan as well, and specifically calling out some metrics. We're talking about redevelopment of some key commercial industrial sites. I think we could look at something like assessed value per acre as an interesting metric for this district, where certain sites like the Shopko Plaza, Sacred Heart, or even the industrial project, some of those industrial I think are intended to become public as part of recreation, but I think a lot of this area is kind of this sprawl development, which has a low value per acre, and I think as part, again, the Redevelopment Authority's mission is increasing value within the city is to create more density of value per acre. So I think that would be an interesting metric to see in this. For the housing discussion in there, I think some similar housing metrics as the earlier one. And then I think the point I wanted to, I guess, make earlier on kind of the key performance metrics, that this plan does call out, tracking occupancy rates, affordability targets, and so I guess, again, creating existing conditions so that we can then have something to measure against, I think would just, again, help with being able to track what we're doing, and again, know when we're done. So I think this one's a little easier because once Shopko and Sacred Heart and the industrial spaces are redeveloped, we kind of say, oh, this might be done. But again, just wanted to make sure we're intentional about that. Thank you.
No, absolutely. And to your point, the comp plan calls out, particularly in the industrial area, medium to high density residential in the future use plan. So we can pull some of the density metrics of units per acre and things, and we can make some specific references to that. This one track with the redevelopment. This will track very closely with the comp plan, and we don't see major changes to what this area already calls out. So we can put in some definite metric numbers.
All right, I don't think we have any further comments.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Good work on that.
So next item is just a quick update on the EPA brownfield assessment. So we are not taking on any new projects until the government opens up again, so which means we can't submit for any new evaluations. We can continue the work on any of the existing ones. The payment portal is still available, and we can still do some reimbursements on existing things as long as it was nothing special or required any special approvals, because the reimbursement portal is automatic. You just put in your expense request for the grant, and then they cut back a check. So anything that was already pre-approved prior to the shutdown, we'll continue to keep moving forward on those. We have a number of phase ones we're doing, some on some public spaces, a couple of the parks, Owen Park, Bandshell, which is looking to do potential renovation or redo. We're doing a phase one on there. A few private properties. There are some planning concepts in the work for the YMCA to help them do some draft concept planning for Y facilities. We are moving forward on some deeper site investigation for the Malden Avenue site. We have a project for Malden Avenue. We haven't talked a lot about that because it's not an RDA district, but we have a $25 to $30 million project ready to go into Malden Avenue, which is a former undeclared landfill. So we're going to be doing some soil borings and some additional investigation on that site to move that project forward. So, and we are also going to be doing some investigation on behalf of the Sacred Heart project. Be doing a phase one and looking to do some of they've done a lot of their asbestos and lead paint mitigation, but they're going to bring in and have a company do some detailed investigation. So they're going to bore holes through the walls. They're going to run fiber optic through chases, because right now their estimate on demo has $1 million, $1.5 million swing. They said that could come from just the asbestos removal. As they're demoing, every time they find asbestos hidden in a wall, they have to stop, bring in a remediation, mitigate, shut everything down, and then pick it back up again, and the cost get. So they want to know what they're facing when they go in. So we're going to use some of the EPA funds to help do some of that investigation. Be happy to answer any other questions on the EPA grant. We think we've got a lot of our projects allocated. We're probably not even, I don't think we'll even be doing any more public sessions, trying to find more spaces. I think we have it sufficient enough to finish out the grant. It's just completing the work.
Anything else you want to report on today?
No, I did want to have one piece for the executive director's report. Regards to Kessler Park, there has been a request from a project to see if there is an opportunity to maybe try and come forward with a project earlier than anticipated. This is a project that's nonprofit. They're brand new. They have no experience in development. Our standard has been, and we have used this on several times, the RDA, is that on a project that's fully dependent on fundraising like this, we required that they have 75% of funding committed before they come forward as a project. Is what we don't want to see is land tied up in somebody who can't raise the final and never does anything. Then we have to go through the process of bringing the land back. They're asking if the board would consider 50% fundraised and a long phase of development to bring the project forward for review by the RDA. I don't need a formal vote or anything like this. I'm just looking for feedback on the board. Is this something that you would want to consider, or do we hold to what is the standard, what our standard has been, standard practice has been at 75% committed funding before we take it on as a project, as a project review?
And then the other thing you said, a long development process?
They are asking, our standard also has been break ground within 12 months, completion within 24. We have done some other phasing. P&R Properties project in Cannery District, prime example. They had 2 buildings, so their start date, and they got a little delayed. We extended the start date because everything relates around COVID, and then the interest rate increase pushed their start date back a little bit. And I think we had an 18-month. We ended up going a little bit longer on the phasing just because 2 separate buildings, and they originally intended to have almost built on separate timelines. They ended up accelerating it so they could have met the original timeline, but we did give them a little longer phasing to build. This group would ask to have again, it's based off a phone call, 4 phases potentially, and it would be stretched out over quite a bit more time. Again, we're at the point where I don't want them coming forward and making specific requests. That's not how we've done this, but if you're willing to accept some alternate parameters, we could give them some different benchmarks to let them come forward earlier than we would anticipate to present. Again, board would still have a review and potential approval or not approval of the sale, but this might bring them forward before the board earlier.
What do we know about this group?
They have no money raised at this point that I'm aware of.
Do they have background or history in developing anything?
No.
Well, I would have a hard time extending it then.
Yep.
And also probably would want more money down. So, not to go against what your policy is already. That's my vote, but.
That aligns perfectly with what I was thinking, given the lack of a track record and experience and, knowledge other than intent and hope for a good project.
That looks like, I see a lot of head shaking, so I think looks like that's common consent.
Yeah, I would concur with everything that's been said. I just, we have limited funds to get this type of project accomplished or, within this area to get a good project completed, and I would hate to see that tied up. And so I think adhering to our standard policy is my preference as well.
Okay, perfectly. We can pass that word on. As far as remaining spaces go, We have an active project working on the Riverside site. They are working with, the interested party is working with the local well-regarded builder, getting a budget together on construction cost of what will be definitely a makerspace type of facility. It's a company that's already operational, and they're growing extensively and need more space. They're looking at a little bit of manufacturing, a little bit of retail and community space kind of tied in. So it'd be a great fit for the cannery district within that Riverside site. We have had 3 inquiries about the Kessler Park location, have not, 3 additional inquiries besides the one that I just referenced about the Kessler Park location, have not seen any projects specifically come forward. 2 of them are light tech operators, so would be looking at potentially a light tech project. The height space, we are been sending out reminders that it's available. We've had a couple of mild inquiries about it. Some folks who've been building in other areas are looking at maybe some different product types there, but again, haven't seen anybody come forward with a project. Silver Creek, the one who originally had the MOU and put it on hold, they did indicate that if interest rates get down in that 5.5% range again, they would potentially bring that project back, and we're creeping into that range, so we might even see Silver Creek's project for that space come forward again as well. So that's what we've got on this. We're still getting a ton of inquiries about development space across the community. Still a lot of activity going on, so things are going well. We should see on the Liner site, give an update. They are finishing up on their the residential property above, the residential space above the transit center. They had hoped to be occupied by, I believe, November or December of this year. I think first quarter next year is more likely to occur on that space, my personal opinion. And then they are prepping. We have reviewed them. They are kind of preparing to continue to move forward on their project on the Liner site. So as a reminder, it's 5 stories, ground floor commercial, 4 additional stories of residential. Open to potentially condoing the ground floor. We actually have a project that might be interested if they do condo the ground floor space. That we have a project that might be inclined to buy the whole thing from them as part of that. So should see some movement on that. I don't expect anything to occur on that until the transit center is completed. So we're probably looking at spring 2026 before we see a lot of movement on that space.
Aaron, I do have small updates on that as well.
Oh, excellent.
I've been in communication with the developer, and we had a meeting over at the transfer center. We were able to talk about the Liner site as well, and they're ready to kind of start purchasing a lot from us. So I was reviewing the material the other day, and it looks like we might just need to have a letter of understanding between both parties on the sale since it's been past September 30th. But that's the only big update I have for you guys. So it'll be, I would love to bring it for sale within this month, even early next week.
Yeah, this would be to extend the closing date. The purchase agreement was approved. The closing date was going to be September 30th, and obviously we are past that date, so we can look to bring forward an amendment for that.
Anything else?
That's all I have for me.
All right, thank you. Yep.
Well, yeah, I don't want to
ahead.
interject. I think the next item on the agenda, I think, was just our next meeting date, and I just want to share I will not be there. So that's all.
Thank you.
All right, well, if I could get a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, very good. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Great work. That's a lot.